Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be reading and giving my analysis on an article from the Associated Press called Global Impact: 5 Ways the War in Ukraine Has Changed the World. Now, this is different content from what I normally post on this channel, but I want to kind of broaden this channel's prospects a little bit and talk about more things that I'm interested in, such as current events, news, politics, the economy, and entertainment, so on and so forth. So the first one today I chose is to talk about the war in Ukraine, because to me it's one of the most watched and listened to topics for me personally, because I believe that the war in Ukraine has such a big economic, domestically and globally, impact across the world, and depending on how this war ends and how it will continue, right, it will change the way our globe will and move forward. So I chose this article specifically from the Associated Press to talk about because it talks about the 5 ways the world has changed since the war in Ukraine. It's been a full year now of fighting, seemingly not going to end anytime soon. And I frankly just want to talk more about this war because even though the United States and the rest of the West, like NATO, aren't directly in conflict, like our troops are not in the battlefields fighting against Russia, I find it harder and harder to say that places like America are in peace too, right? We're not at war, we're not in a hot war, but we can't say we're in peace now. We're producing a lot of weapons and shipping them over to Ukraine, and there's a lot of tensions between Russia, China, and the United States of America. Personally, in a global sense, I think there's a lot at stake in this war other than Ukraine not being a country. Because yes, Russia is going in there to try to basically absorb Ukraine and make Ukraine no longer Ukraine, but rather Russia. But I think in a more global perspective, the Chinese are also looking at Russia and how this Ukraine invasion will end up, because they themselves have territorial disputes with another country, Taiwan. How this war goes will inform China's decision whether to invade Taiwan or not. Given the tensions and the similarities between China and Taiwan and Russia and Ukraine, I bet that the Chinese are very much looking at how the West is going to respond and how Russia is ultimately going to come out of this invasion. Let's get into the article where it states 5 ways the world has changed. There's a return of war in Europe. So I agree with them. This is pretty significant because Europe hasn't seen a war of this kind of scale since World War II, essentially. A lot of the battles are now very reminiscent of World War II or even World War I. Within this article, they actually state that a few years back, Boris Johnson was scoffing at the idea that Britain needed to increase its tank capacity, increase its military capacity. And it's very interesting to note that because since the invasion of Ukraine, Boris Johnson is very much in support to provide Ukraine with more military tanks, more military supports, anything that they need to fight the Russians off. I mean, pre-Ukraine invasion and post-World War II, Europe was very different. Germany, for instance, it's been many decades since it's been Nazi Germany, but post World War II, they've almost unilaterally vowed to not build up the military, not put a lot of money towards military spending, and they were also very much in tune with buying Russian gas and oil to support their economy. Since the invasion, not only are they no longer buying gas and oil from Russia, they're also now spending billions of the German dollar to build up their armed forces to make sure that they're ready for a potential confrontation, and providing a bunch of military support, helmets, weapons, grenade launchers, and now tanks like the Leopard 2 to Ukraine so they can fight Russia. It's a huge and remarkable step in a different direction for Germany. And the next part of the article is now talking about how alliances are being changed, tested, or even fortified even further because of this war. Pre-war, Russia was very much feeling pretty confident about NATO's response not being very positive, at least for the Ukrainians. Putin at the time had good reason to believe that NATO was not going to respond very unilaterally against him for the invasion in Ukraine, partly because, let's go back to 2017, right, when President Donald Trump was the president of the United States. He openly questioned the need for the United States to be within NATO. He openly questioned why NATO was a thing. And to be fair, right, NATO was created to counter the Soviet Union. It was created to counter some sort of adversary, military adversary. In the last 40 years, or rather 30 years since the Soviet Union has collapsed, there hasn't been such a big looming military threat to NATO NATO being the United States, Canada, and a lot of parts of Eastern Europe. Like, so there wasn't much of a cause and a reason for NATO to still be so prevalent and for countries to constantly work together. Even Emmanuel Macron, who's the president of France, I believe it was 27 or 18, actually had called NATO brain dead. So there was a lot of reasons for Putin to believe that NATO was not going to respond very strongly to their invasion, because pre-invasion they were very much not working as a single unit. Now, post-war, since Russia has invaded Ukraine as of February 24, 2022, I think NATO has grown much stronger than Vladimir Putin would have ever liked. The United States, Great Britain, France, Poland, a lot of the NATO countries, they all banded together and swiftly condemned Russia's invasion. I mean, hell, at the time, Putin, one of his main reasons of invading Ukraine was to prevent NATO expansion onto his borders. But now we have Sweden and Finland, who are not NATO members, and Finland, who has a border, shares a border with Russia, that normally plays it very safe, more like doesn't pick sides between Russia and NATO. They're just trying to be friendly and not piss off Russia. They've finally thrown their hands up. It's like, we give up. We're not playing this game anymore. We're joining NATO, and they have joined NATO since the invasion, which is a huge step, because that does exactly what Putin didn't want, which was to have NATO on his borders. And then moving further, the article talks more about there's a new Iron Curtain forming. Okay, makes sense. A battered and reshaped economy for places like Europe, Russia, and Africa. So when the United States and the rest of the West brought sanctions upon Russia, and even when Russia invaded Ukraine, Russia and Ukraine I think Ukraine gives about 40% of grain to the world. So the moment they were invaded, now their ability to collect grain and ship it to other countries had went down severely. So a lot of countries in Africa were dealing with starvation and not being able to have food on the table because their food prices were too damn high. And then lastly, it talks about a new age of uncertainty, how this conflict, of course, we have no idea how this is going to end. It's brought up once again the talk of the use of nuclear weapons, because Russia hasn't been getting their way, scare the West from providing more support. There's also more uncertainty in the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which is in Ukraine. It's in the Zaporizhzhia Oblast in the middle of the country. Currently, Russia controls that area and the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. So that's it for this video. Just want to give some of my thoughts and opinions on the war in Ukraine, talk about a little bit how the world has changed since the invasion. I don't think personally that this war is anywhere close to being done, unfortunately. And even if the war were to end today, we would be feeling the effects of this war for decades to come. So I leave it to you guys down in the comments. One, do you like seeing these kind of videos? Do you want to see more of these? And then two, what are your thoughts on the war in Ukraine? Are you American? Do you feel like it affects you in any way? Financially speaking, mentally speaking? If you're not in the US, how do you view the conflict? What part of the globe are you? I'm really interested to hear what you guys think and what you guys have to say. So I'll see you guys in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.